I want to ask you about working with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
He needed to deliver these lines direct to camera, and every line was like, oh, this is not like, they were easy lines. They were just like, they were rough. So I started kind of looking around. I'm like, someone should do something. And then I'm like, oh, that's me.
Welcome to Badass Softie, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and today marks the first time in this podcast where we are going to be doing an interview. I have had so much fun connecting with friends of mine and mentors and people who inspire me and getting them to come and be on this podcast so they can do the same thing for you. And for our very first interview, I was so excited to introduce you to my friend, Blaine Hogan. I've known Blaine for a long time. He is an incredibly creative, strong leader. I mean, he really is a badass softie. He leads with vulnerability and yet has done huge projects working with people like Billie Eilish and Carrie Underwood, Usher, John Legend, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who he talks about today in the podcast, LeBron James. And what Blaine has moved into is an area called branded entertainment. And what he does is actually work with companies and goes beyond commercials. So he's worked with companies like Alaska Airlines and Magnolia and Nike to create television shows, YouTube channels, movies that really communicate the value of a company and the values of a company. And the way he does it is what impresses me the most. So if you've ever put on an event or finished a huge project, but at the end of it, yes, of course, you're exhausted, but really you feel completely depleted and burnt out and maybe sick of your team instead of energized. Blaine provides some amazing insight into his process and how you can get to the finish line of your next project without hating everyone when it's all done. Hi, Blaine. I am so excited for you to be here today. And I talked about it a little bit in the intro, but your resume to me is so fun of like the huge groups that you've worked with, the brands you worked with, like Alaska Airlines and Magnolia and Nike, and the people you've worked with, Arnold Schwarzenegger and LeBron James and Billie Eilish. Like, you've got this kind of amazing list. But there's a bigger reason why you're here. And you and I have actually not, I don't think, ever talked about this. And
oh my God.
Yeah. So yes, I'm going to kind of spring this on you a little bit. So please. I'm going to take us back to 2013. 2013, okay. I had just come out of the closet. I had left basically professional ministry, and I was stepping into a creative endeavor where I was launching a television show and trying to figure out what my life was going to be because it had felt like it had kind of all fallen apart. And I joined a group that you had created called Make Better. And it was a group that really inspired and challenged people to use their creative work to be a part of their healing journey and discover more about themselves. And here I am, this scared Gaby, you know, a new gay guy out at 37 years old. And
Gaby is a baby gay?
Baby gay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
So I'm a Gaby at this point, and not knowing fully like where my life is headed. And you at the time were a pastor at a one of what I would argue.
Whoa. I was a creative director.
You were a creative director, but you were on staff at what I would say is arguably the most, if not one of the most influential churches in the world. And as a creative director who was employed at a church, not wondering how I was going to be received in this group, not only did you care for me and guide me in some really powerful ways that I didn't even know I needed, but helped me in the early process of figuring out how to be creative and how to share my story and how to just be like, again, just share beauty with the world. Like I was creating a television show that had nothing to do with who I was or what was going on. And yet I was stifled. And I joined your group and you coached me along with others in how to continue being creative, continue using my own personal story and gift to step into a place that I could actually impact the whole world in a new way. And we've never talked about this. You and I have hung out. We like,
no,
but
I know. I'm like, how have we never talked about this?
I don't know,
like,
actually.
I'm now remembering that.
The way that you approach creativity and the way that you approach vulnerability and healing through art and creating and building things has carried. I had forgotten, to be honest, until this interview, how much that influenced the way that I approached my new life in this new way with new freedom and new healing. And so you're here because of the impact that you had on me, but you're also here because I know that you have then gone on to write books and do marketing work and ad work and movie work that you've taken those principles and kind of applied them to all these other areas.
JJ, I have chills. If I wasn't so medicated on ADHD medication and antidepressants, I'm certain I would cry.
And there's the vulnerability right off the bat. I love it so much. Well, I shouldn't have sprung that on you, but I was like,
Not at all.
I'm going to say this.
That's the perfect way to start. It's the perfect way to start.
You have been involved in the arts from being a theater kid all the way to now, right? Talk to me about your growth from being a theater kid to somebody who now leads teams to create these incredible pieces of art that impact the world.
Sure. Well, I went on stage because I needed attention.
I think that's how everybody starts.
I lived so I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in Blaine, Minnesota. And so already my ego was very well taken care of. This was back in the day when there were classified ads that you could respond to for, cattle call auditions. So like I auditioned for Blue's Clues and Sesame Street Live, and when they were casting John Connor for Terminator, like I auditioned for all of these in Minneapolis. I did not get any of those roles, which is why I think I'm also so comfortable with failure, because as an actor, you mostly fail at all of the auditions. Very long story short, eventually landed in Chicago, and from there things kind of took off. I started to work there. I started work at the Goodman. I started working at the big theaters in Chicago. Producers were flying me to New York to audition for Broadway shows like Wicked. I got cast in Prison Break, and I was a working actor. Like I was getting a check from 20th Century Fox, and I was living the dream.
So for those of us who have been in this space before, right? So a lot of my people who I am friends with have been in kind of the theater and entertainment world. And we all know that really when you're a professional actor, you're a waiter and a cell phone salesman, right? Like,
right. Getting kicked in the nuts by middle school kids in a cell phone foam costume.
Yeah, that is what being an actor is for many, many years, right? It's like this thing of where it's a lot of failure and it's a lot of hustle and it's a lot of sacrifice that now if somebody's looking at your reels, they're going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And yet it all started in this other space. And I don't want to gloss over that, because I think for anybody in leadership and business, obviously, failure is such a big part of our learning curve, and experimentation, especially early on, and being free, that you don't get a lot of that later. Once you like kind of get some success and you kind of start building, you feel like you don't want failure to be a part of it anymore. And yet that's the thing that built who we are. And also, experimentation got us to where we are. And then we get to this set place of success and we go, well, I can't experiment anymore, because that was when I was young and foolish, and yet now I'm grown up and I'm not going to do that anymore. But anybody who's done anything has to recognize that the failure and the experimentation is what got us to where we are today.
That's right. Yeah. And yes. And I need to remember not just the lessons of that failure. I need to continue to apply them today. Like, I feel like I'm very much in a season of experimenting and failure. And it's Monday morning and I am making it up. Like I'm making up what I do today because, all of those achievements really are still just plateaus. As I seek to live, a truly creative life, I know that at some point you reach a plateau and you got to break it again. And so those lessons I feel like are not just the building blocks that get you to where you are today, like the hard knocks of failure and, living out of your car and moving from place to place and trying to like chase a gig. I think that those need to also become reminders for us to go, okay, it's time to do that thing again. And if we could have figured it out then, we can figure it out now. We feel like the stakes are so much higher, right? Because if we're older, we've got kids and a family, and you got to pay bills and whatever. But like JJ, that's what you're doing. You're literally doing it right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's a hard reminder, but it's a good reminder. Just like,
yeah, so scary.
It is, but it's so good. And there is an excitement to it. And so for you, you kind of have this act one almost of you like building who you are and just growing up and fighting and struggling and all these things. And then you get to this point where you are starting to get like known in Chicago in the theater world, like getting cast at major theaters in major roles. And then you get Prison Break, and now you're on one of the hottest at the time television shows that's on TV. Like, hottest from like Buzz and hottest from like, there were a lot of hot people on that show. So like you got all these things going on, and you're all of a sudden you get this level of success. And what does that season look like for you?
Yeah. And it's like so moderate. I mean, I want to both celebrate it and downplay it, right? I was a prison bitch for like 6 episodes. Let's do it.
Trust me, the amount of hours I have gotten out of my one, music video with Missy Elliott, I downplay it, but also that's the party story that keeps giving. So,
I mean, that season was exactly what you said. Like, it was this sort of up and to the right. I'm living my dream. When I think about like a 9-year-old kid from Minnesota imagining what it would be like to live as a professional actor, I was living it. And then I started having these panic attacks, like debilitating. I felt like I was dying, panic attacks. And so a number of times I had driven myself to the emergency room, and I had done a good amount of therapy up until that point. There's a great book, Bessel van der Kolk. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. Essentially this idea that your brain can kind of turn off trauma from the past, but your body never does. And eventually, at some point, it comes to the surface and you have to deal with it. And I had been dealing with it in my own ways of avoiding the pain that I felt. A part of the story that I hadn't told was that when I was 10 years old, I experienced some sexual abuse in my neighborhood. And that kind of set me on this path of what I came to realize. Now I'm 23, 24 years old, 25, realizing, the panic attacks are actually a symptom of what I would come to understand as sex addiction. I had numbed myself in so many ways, and that was kind of my drug of choice. And so I came to this point where professionally things were moving up and to the right, but internally everything was falling apart. And it was also at that same time that I started learning about a guy named Dan Allender. He'd written a book called The Wounded Heart, which is kind of the Bible for adult victims of childhood sexual abuse. Someone had recommended that book to me, and I remember realizing that he had a school in Seattle, and I just felt this really strong pull that was the thing I was supposed to do next. And it was in Seattle that I would probably say like the act 2 began. where I started doing the kind of deep story work, understanding where I had come from, and kind of really doing that excavation work on my past, and a lot of healing work, that I could start, kind of rebuilding my life.
And from there, you go through a phase of where it's like, okay, now how do you take all of this healing and the creative experiences that you've had on stage and your education and on camera and all these things, and you now have to take everything that you've experienced, your own personal healing, your own experience, and now lead teams in creative work? Because I heard you say one time that skill gets you in the room, but character is what keeps you there. Mm-hmm. How do you then take all the things that you've learned and all of your experiences and apply that and that principle now to this new work that you're doing?
Yeah. I in my church days, I had a leader one time, sit me down. This is probably like halfway through that time. I was there for about 10 years. And he said, Blaine, I think that your character hasn't caught up to your competency. Was like probably the hardest one-on-one I ever had. And the hardest part was that he was right. I had not yet still like really infused what it meant to be integrous, to be kind, to really be considerate of others. Like I still kind of had this winning, like I need to win, competitive sort of spirit about me that needed some correction. And I took it, I received it. And I think since then, that has been kind of exactly what you're bringing up, is how do you come to a room with your vulnerability, when, especially as a director or as a leader, you feel like that is somehow going to make you less appealing to follow. But there are two important lessons that I think got me to this point where I feel like that's the only way. The first is, as I was kind of transitioning out of the church space and looking to be a commercial director, a television director, I got linked up with Reza Tabrizi. He was the executive producer on Chicago Fire. And I got to shadow him a bunch while he was directing and producing. And we were having breakfast one day, and he said, Blaine, if you want to be a great director, you need to be comfortable walking onto set knowing that you might not have the best idea. And I was like, what do you mean? You're the director. You're supposed to have it figured out. He's like, no, your job is to cast the vision, but a lot of what your work is creating the team that can figure it out without you. Or that when you're stuck, someone from any department can come in and go, oh, you just need to do that. Like, just move the camera there. And I was like, that's amazing. And then the other thing is I started going to LA and I working on big commercial productions. And for the first half of a day, everyone was afraid of me. Everyone, like to a person, because they didn't know when I was either going to drop the shtick or when I was going to, like lay down the hammer. And I remember pulling aside, especially a PA. I was like, hey, the vibe feels kind of off to you, don't you? He's like, yeah, they're just not sure they believe you yet. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, most directors are assholes. And so we're waiting for you to yell at us. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not going to happen. So spread the word. Like, that's it. And now more and more, I'm realizing like, oh, that I can't lead any other way. I can't parent any other way. I can't be a partner or a spouse any other way. I can't be a friend any other way. But I think we know enough even just about brain chemistry that, you can flood people with fear and flood their brains with cortisol. And guess what? They'll make the least creative decision because they're in fight or flight. Or you can obviously be incredibly confident in the vision that you're casting, but tell people that they're safe. that they're here and we want 1,000% of you, and flood them with the good juju on their beautiful brains. And you're going to get so much more out of it. And if someone takes advantage of it, that's super easy. You just fire them.
So true. Because you are still ultimately in charge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things I'm loving about this, but the big thing is when you talked about at the very beginning, you mentioned how you wanted to come in and win. And I don't feel like you've lost that in the midst of bringing in those other pieces. Like that's the big thing for me about, again, why it's Badass Softie, right? It's this idea that like when you go, oh, you know what? Let's not worry about the win. Let's just all feel safe. And we've never had a conversation where I feel like that is the mentality. It's the yes and in it, right? It is that idea of like, no, we're going to go for the win, but there's actually a better way to go for the win.
That's right. I think my experience has been not that people take advantage of it, but they're like, oh, I'm being treated like an adult and not a child because this person isn't parenting me. And I'm going to work harder because of the atmosphere here, that it feels like not just good vibes, but there's something else here that we're trying to do that is bigger than this commercial, bigger than this whatever. I think about, you actually mentioned this, but there's this great interview that Martin Scorsese and Daniel Day-Lewis are doing. I think it's a Charlie Rose interview, and it's after Gangs of New York. And Charlie is asking both Martin and Daniel, one, Martin, why did you choose Daniel? And Daniel, why did you choose to come on board? Because he's so selective with projects. And both of them were saying essentially the same thing, but Scorsese was like, I want an ally. I want someone that when it's raining and the sets and the costumes have been burned to a crisp, that the crew and cast go, show must go on. Let's keep going. And what they talk about is like a tunnel that they want. They want people that they can go into the tunnel with, because a creative endeavor is terrifying. Like you're making something that never was before. It can be a silly little commercial, or it can be the thing that you've written in your basement, your opus. It doesn't matter what the actual thing is, but a creative endeavor, it can be so terrifying if you don't have people around you that are willing to go into the fire with you. And I feel like there are leaders who feel like they create that fire through fear. And then there are others, like I think me, that I would rather lead with sort of the softy side of that. But that turns people into badasses is what I've experienced.
100%. And I would even, my philosophy has even shifted a little bit more in these last few years of even moving beyond an ally. Like, so I actually I love the word ally and coming alongside and fighting. And when I go into projects now, what I'm looking for is somebody who's an accomplice. So it's kind of like that next level to me of engagement. Like ally is like, I am with you, but you just got arrested. Ooh, good luck, kind of thing. And accomplice is like, hey, if you go down, I go down. Like, and if we win, we worked together to make this happen. And creating that kind of environment is not easy. That's, we can sit here and say, all you need to do is make people feel safe. It's not a big deal, you guys. Or all you need to do is check your ego at the door and don't worry, let other people talk. That's so much easier said than done. And most of us can take those leaps and bounds forward in those areas after we've failed miserably. So I do want to ask kind of really then specific. So talking about it's harder than it seems. Let's just break down. I want to ask you about working with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So you walk on, Arnold is there, and now you have to embody everything you're just talking about. Like you have to show Arnold that you know what you're doing, but you also have to allow creative, but you also have to, how did that situation go?
Yeah, we were It was for a project called Ladder. But Arnold and LeBron many years ago created a protein powder company. They wanted to basically democratize the millions of dollars that they spend annually on their own nutrition for kind of like the everyday athlete. And so we were in his personal gym in his home. And he had a dialect coach with him because he's still like learning even now, which I thought was amazing. And then he was doing we had done all the B-roll and it was great. And he looked amazing and he's sweaty and he's huge. And he needed to deliver these lines direct to camera. And we kept going, and every line was like, oh, this is not like, they were easy lines. They were just like, they were rough and just didn't feel like him. And this was legitimately my second or third actual real commercial production. So I started kind of looking around. I'm like, someone needs to say something. Someone should do something. Someone's got to go and tell Arnold that this isn't. So I'm literally looking around, waiting for like his handler, a producer, a person, and then I'm like, oh shit, that's me. Like if anyone's going to get him to try to do something different, that's me. And so immediately I remember a story being back in college. We had this acting teacher. Her name was Trudy Kessler. She was from Chicago and she was a badass Softie. I mean, she was the definition of it. So kind and gentle. And then she would watch a scene from the very back of the auditorium, the theater. And if she didn't believe you, she would just yell it. She would say, I don't believe you, from the back of the theater. And that image came directly to my mind. And before I could even think, Arnold says another line and it's not very good. And I'm like, Arnold, I don't believe you. And I'm like,
he could crush me in this moment.
And everybody, like, it was like room fell silent. Like it was already quiet, but got quieter. And Arnold like turns, he looks at me and I have this like, seeing his like Terminator laser red eyes looking at me. He looks at me, he doesn't say anything. He turns back to the camera and he does the line again. And it was perfect. It was like, something inside of him somehow engaged suddenly and he did it. And I was like, cut, that's it, moving on. And it was terrifying, but it was a moment of like the kindness, the softie was telling him the truth, but it had to come in a way that felt like I was being a real badass and I was scared out of my mind.
Those are some of the hardest things because I think actually a confident leader does exactly what you do, is you stand up and you tell the truth, even when it feels risky. Like that is such a hard thing to do. But also if you've created an environment and a culture where those kind of conversations can happen in a productive way, a friend of ours, Tim Arnold always says, if somebody tells you you're being brutally honest, that's actually not a compliment because the brutal part is what they want you to know. Like you can be honest without it being brutal. And I think that's what you did with Arnold. You were very honest and he knew the stakes in that moment too. He's a professional, right? If he's probably more frustrated with himself than anybody else on that set. And he knows he's not getting it. And you're telling him the truth and you're saying it in a way that helps him get out of his own way. Done. That to me is not brutal honesty. That's honesty and integrity in that moment. And ultimately the way that you do that is so powerful, both behind the camera and the team that's there and out to the audience. So Blaine, thank you. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for being here. And people can find you at blainehogan.com. Is that the best place for people to check out your reels, check out what you're doing, and ultimately maybe partner with Blaine to bring some of this goodness to the world? So thank you. You continue to inspire, and I'm so excited for everything I'm seeing coming out right now and everything that's coming out in the future.
Thank you.
Wow, what an amazing conversation. Blaine truly is a badass softie. I mean, creating space where people feel safe enough to bring their best self so that things can be even more creative and you can get even more work done. That's what Badass Softie really is all about. The part that really stuck out to me was the whole idea is being the kind of person that you can go into a tunnel with. I mean, I've heard Lorne Michaels say that when he's casting for SNL, he wants people on the show who he can take a cross-country road trip with. And I've heard other people say, I want to work with people who I would feel comfortable going camping with. When we're in those uncomfortable, hard, exhausting spaces, we all want people around us who are able to just to go in and be there and be present with us and get through that tunnel. Aren't we all that kind of person? We want to be the person people can rely on, who knows that when hard things happen, we're going to show up. We're going to keep pushing, even in those most darkest moments. We're going to show and point towards the light. That is really what I think being a badass softie leader is. It's stepping into those hard spaces and saying, come with me. I know the way forward. This isn't easy. It's not going to be simple, and it might even be a little scary, but we're in this together. Let's link arms together, keep moving towards the light. And in the process, not only will we create great things, but we will become a great team. So here's how to take the first step. Do you have a project coming up or one you're currently working on? Because I'm sure you do. Right after this episode ends, answer this question. What do I need to do to be seen as the kind of leader who people would follow into the tunnel? What do you need to do to make that a reality? That is the big question for me. It's not about looking to other people. Yes, you can use this to create amazing teams and find people to go with you in this project. But the reality is, and I think the more important question is, what do I need to do to become that type of leader? That is what being a badass softie really is all about. So let me leave you with this. May you create safe spaces where people feel safe enough to not just bring their best work, but also their bravest ideas. Spaces where collaboration sparks and innovation takes root. May you be the kind of leader others are not only willing to follow into the tunnel, but grateful to share the tunnel with. May your honesty be tempered with compassion, making you a fierce ally who tells the truth and stands with grace. And may those you impact see you as more than a leader, but as an accomplice, standing shoulder to shoulder in support through all the ups and downs. Because we believe that you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.